here with my husband Bob. We're guest hosting for John Stewart today, and our in-studio guest is Craig Hawkins, a researcher for Walter Martin's Christian Research Institute.
We're going to take another call, but I want to ask Craig a couple of questions. I heard just a while back, since we got into this conspiracy theory, Craig, that actually the reason why women are going to work today and why women have to go to work today is because the witches and the Satanists, basically the witches, have gotten into all the preschools, and they're getting kids and using them for different satanic rituals and so forth and so on. And they're really behind the whole women's movement and working, and they're behind a lot of the preschools, and they're there. But you don't really know they're there, but they're there. And
that they, in fact, have invented the daycare system.
And I wonder, could you respond to that? Because this is sort of we know that the Masons are out there, we know that the Illuminati's out there, we know the bankers are out there. Now we have the witches out there trying to get us in the preschool area. So all of us, if our kids go to preschool, we have to worry about witches being there. They even act very nice and everything.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier to the previous caller. You're talking about Matthew 24, when Jesus said there's going to be, in essence, many false Christs, false messiahs, false doctrines. Paul talks about that in Timothy, both 1 and 2 as well. I think there are legitimate problems out there. For example, there appears to be some preschools that may have been involved in some form of witchcraft or Satanism, and actually were using the children in their rituals. Now, I say appear because I'm not an expert on this particular evidence. It's highly debatable. But I'm saying, even if we grant, let's just, for the sake of argument, say it is true, there are several of them that it is the case, that in no way entitles us to, by any stretch of our imaginations or of logic, to assume or to infer that all preschools were set up by Satanists or people practicing witchcraft or any other conspiracy group we want to throw in here. This really is a mentality that Christians have to watch, because it makes us look ridiculous. Now, I agree, there's some things that people just don't want to believe. I understand that, and people don't want to deal with them, and they need to. For example, Satanism does exist, but let's not blow it out of proportion and start seeing one under every rock and tree. And for these claims specifically, these claims about women having to work and daycare centers being explicitly started by people who are in the occult so they can abuse their children. I mean, these claims are ridiculous. They're literally ridiculous. There's no evidence for this. It's absurd. And we as Christians have to be very careful. We walk a fine line. We need to have a good report towards those that are without. We need to present ourselves in a credible fashion. And when Christians make claims like these, it really makes us look like a bunch of goofballs. And people who are
specifically because these claims cannot be substantiated, not because, well, they're true, but nobody will believe it.
Precisely. It's one of these things, well, it's really there. I mean, there's a pink elephant in my room, and he's really there, but when you go in, you can't see him. But he's there. I tell you, I saw him. I mean, if we can't substantiate these claims, well, I mean, if you can't falsify it, then there's probably something wrong with it.
Yeah, I think I would like to say, though, too, as a parent, as well as a professional in the cult apologetics field, it is important to be sensitive to our children's needs. And if we put our children in the hands of any other responsible party, we need to be careful about what we're doing. We need to check out if it's a preschool. Do they allow drop-in visits at any time? Are there at least 2 adults in every room, with the children? Talk to your children, get recommendations from other parents, from other teachers, from other sources, and keep checking up. We do need to be responsible for our children, and we do need to understand that God has given them to us and that we are held responsible for what happens to them.
Most certainly, but see, that's the balance there. There's a fine balance here. Certainly it doesn't mean we just stick our children in any preschool and assume, just because it has the word Christian on it or somewhere they talk about God, that your children are in the best care. That is just blatant disregard and foolishness as far as watching over your children. But either extreme is dangerous. It's unwarranted, and it's just people are just laughing at us and losing all credibility because these things can't be substantiated.
Okay, let's go to another call, and we'll talk with Craig some more.
Okay. You're on the air. Do you have a question for us?
Hello?
Hello? Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, my name is Georgia.
Okay, Georgia.
I have 2 questions. I hope I'm putting these in the right form for you. Can one that is in a cult be demon-possessed? And, along with it, is a organization that's called a cult, is it occult?
Okay, good. Those are very good. I'll tell you what we do. I like both those questions, and they both address issues that are important for everybody to listen to. So I think what we'll do is we'll go to a quick break, and then we'll come back, and Craig won't have to rush in his answer, okay? So just hang on. Okay, good. Well, Craig's going to address your questions. First of all, Craig, is it possible for somebody in a cult to be demon-possessed?
Now we're talking about cults or occult?
Well, okay, maybe we'll ask the second question first then. Your second question, Georgia, was what is the difference between a cult and the occult? So, Craig, do you want to address that?
Can a cult be a cult? Is a cult?
Can a cult be occultic, or is a
Good way to
cult
put it.
always
Maybe I'm putting it
occultic?
wrong.
Well, it could be, Georgia, but really that would be confusing our terms.
Okay.
A cult generally is any...
Now, you're saying a cult, one cult?
A cult.
Okay.
Yeah, C-U-L-T. A cult generally is a group that denies at least one of the essentials of the Christian faith, one of the cardinal doctrines which we must believe in order to be a Christian. Okay? For example, Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses generally are just considered a cult. They deny the unique deity of Jesus Christ, the bodily resurrection, salvation by grace. There's three essentials right there which they deny. Okay? Now, the occult is...
Now, this is O-C-C-U-L-T.
Yes. With the occult, what we were talking about here, we were talking some group that may or may not claim to be Christian. By the way, most cultic groups, just cultic groups, claim to be Christian or compatible with Christianity. When you talk to the Mormon missionary comes to your door, he'll tell you he's a Christian and what a fine Christian he is at that. And that... anyway, his views are not only compatible, actually, he has the real true teachings of Jesus. You have the corrupted version.
That's what he'll say anyway.
That's what he'll say. So they generally claim to be compatible with Christianity. Now, most occultists, now I say most, first of all, they don't claim to be compatible with Christianity. Most of them, not all. There's a qualifier there. I apologize for these terms not being really tight, but...
Oh, shall I name the one I'm in reference to?
Sure, go ahead.
Unification Church.
Okay.
Yeah, the money.
You claim to be Christian?
Okay, well, there's a denotative or a specific example of a cult. Well, we would classify them as a cult, not occult. Now, let me give you an example of the occult, okay? The occult is, as I don't know if you heard us earlier, is somebody who is involved in occultic practices. For example, necromancy or communication with the dead, for example, reading tarot cards. It's different forms of divination and different occultic practices. So really, if a group is cultic, you don't necessarily say they're occultic. Unfortunately,
As far as you know, people in this church, they don't do anything like that.
The ordinary members of the Unification Church probably would not. Now, it is true that many cult leaders have supernatural experiences that can only be explained as demonic or occultic.
Yes, and I think that's a very good point Gretchen made there. The rank and file believers generally in a cultic group are not having any occultic experiences, but more than likely it is reasonable to assume from Scripture that the people who are involved in occultism, the cultic leaders have had at least some occultic experience that has been the genesis of their beliefs. Whereas most occultists, every individual in any particular group or organization is actually experiencing or participating in occultic phenomena themselves.
Does that help out there?
Excuse me?
Does that help any on definitely?
Well, somewhat. I'm still a little
I'll throw some a little harder in.
puzzled about the Unification Church. Can I tell you what
Can I throw something in there to make it a little more difficult?
specifically brought this
of us?
up to me about being demon-possessed?
Okay, go ahead.
There was a group of these people from this church. Are you familiar with the term Kaza? The term Kaza?
Yeah, that's one of their many front names.
Yeah, it's an arm. Somebody said an arm of Unification Church. There was a group of them in our city. They were soliciting, as we called it, on property where they were not supposed to be. A uniformed officer, the officer had,
Georgia?
they were running them off daily. One of the officers told
Georgia, we're going to have to go to a break quickly, a station ID, and we'll be back in just a second, okay? Thank you.
they defied the officers on two different occasions that they did not have to leave, and et cetera, and just was going to insist on doing their thing. But the one I didn't talk to afterwards, the one that I talked to afterwards, that he had a long confrontation with this person that finally got him to leave, said that he never saw a look like he saw in this person's eyes. And he says, I cannot even tell you what it was. And so this is when I was wondering if this person could have been demon-possessed. She defied the officer that she did not have to leave,
Okay.
et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Craig, what would you say to that?
That's a good point, but that is not necessarily indicative of demon possession. We as Christians have to be. When I use this term, I'm very leery of using it, and I only use it as a last resort after I have exhausted all psychological and other natural explanations. I do not use that term lightly when if I say somebody is demon possessed. That is a very extreme, rare occurrence. It does occur. But you have to understand something. These people, the Moonies, are adamant about their beliefs and their founder, and all type of cults.
Why did they defy the law like
Well, but believe me, that's nothing. As far as cult activities, there's occultists who do all kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily mean they're demon possessed. It just means they're so warped and so confirmed in their beliefs that they'll even defy authorities.
We just recently there were people who are put in jail who are nuclear freeze people. Are they demon possessed because they
fading out.
Wouldn't move out of a path of a car or truck?
I cannot hear you.
I think what Bob was trying to say is that there are people who believe vehemently in a cause who will go against the law in order to serve their cause, and they may or may not have any involvement with demon possession. I think it's also important for us to remember that although the cults, by and large, are involved more with false beliefs than they are with direct occultic or demonic activity, still, the father of all lies, John 8:44 tells us, the father of all lies is Satan, and so in some sense, Satan, of course, is behind ultimately all unbelief.
Let's answer the last part of your question, and we'll take a few more calls. Craig, can Christians be demon possessed? We'll ask that question. And do people generally involved in the occult, are they possessed by demons, or and can they be possessed by demons? And can demons just walk right into anybody they want to? How does that work?
Well, to part A of your question, I would say, one, no, Christians cannot be demon possessed. Now, this is a very thorny issue. With a lot of Christians, and there's a lot of denominations, movements who will jump up and down and say, yes, a Christian can be demon possessed. I am just merely stating my opinion right now, and I'm of course willing to back it up scripturally. And by the way, I believe, like the Reformers, my philosophy is sola scriptura. I don't appeal to my experience. My experience means nothing if it doesn't correspond with the Scripture. The Scripture is a rule of faith, not my experience. So I would say, one, no, I don't believe Christians be demon possessed. I don't believe all occultists are demon possessed, and necessarily even the majority of them. But certainly some of them are. And any time anyone opens up any door to the occult, even if it's just, they think it's harmful and fun, for example, playing with an Ouija board, and that's just a parlor game. Once a person has opened up that door for the occult, well, that's what they've literally done. They have opened up the door for demonic possession, which is the most extreme form. Of course, there's terms we use as well. It's called subjection or harassment, and these are qualitatively different. I don't mean just a sliding scale, that one scale is harassment and it moves up on a scale to demon possession. There's a qualitative difference. So anyway, to answer your question, Christians cannot be demon possessed, but a lot of occultists definitely are.
Okay,
Can there be a group that you know of, Craig, that denies the essentials of the Christian faith, but also they practice occult practices where they confer with spirits and so forth. In other words, they say they're really that Jesus was a medium, and they use the Bible to voice their view. Is there people in groups like that?
Yeah, that view is very popular. Now, one view doesn't specifically subscribe to that, but it is very close. As for example, Eckankar, they're very into astral projection, which they believe...
astral projection, define it, please.
Yeah, astral projection, they believe that each person has what they call the light body, and that this light body, once a person learns about this body and can learn to control it, can actually leave their physical body and travel around, even go to the other parts of the world and travel what they call the astral planes. There's different astral planes. So, for example, a student of Eckankar from America could leave his physical body, travel in his astral body or light body, and even go to Tibet to a lama or a Buddhist master, and he could confer with him, talk with him, and then come back or know things. There's a lot of groups that are involved in this stuff, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now we have some more calls. Remember, our number is 1-800-227-KBRT, and you can call with practically any question you have or ask us about the occult. Hello, you're on the air. Do you have a question for us?
This is for me.
Yes, this is for you.
But your voice sounds a little distant. I understand what the other people were saying now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I wish I was on a little earlier, a little closer to the young man who talked about Seventh-day Adventists. He said that he didn't know anything about them except that they kept Seventh-day Sabbath Saturday instead of Sunday. And I have some statements to make, and I'd appreciate it if you would bear with me so I could give some.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a question program.
If I have a question too at the end, I would like to ask you.
Okay, well, let's see if you can keep it as short as possible because we have some other calls waiting too, okay?
Okay, all right. My understanding is that Seventh-day Adventists base their doctrine on the scripture of Revelation 14:6-12. It starts with, I saw another angel, and it talks about three angels. The first has the everlasting gospel to preach on the earth, and then the second one deals with Babylon is fallen, and the third one deals with the mark of the beast. Now, I'm trying to cut it short and to hurry up.
Sure.
The young man said, or somebody said that during the time he was talking, that Sunday keepers have the mark of the beast, that Adventists teach that. Well, this is Adventists who are kind of over enthusiastic. I used to hear that too before I became a Seventh-day Adventist, and it did hurt me. But on the other hand, it sent me to search the scriptures for myself. So if Adventists today say that, I wish that those who hear it would search the scriptures for themselves and understand God's word, because it does say in Revelation under the third angel's message that they would have the mark of the beast. But since I've learned the true understanding, as far as I know, that's where I would ask for your explanation a little later. As a Seventh-day Adventist now who have studied for quite some time, our understanding of this mark of the beast is that after these messages have been presented to the world and people have had a chance to decide for themselves, in the closing days of Earth's history, just like you had been talking about the millennium and the tribulation and things like that, in those days, people would come face to face with these messages, the messages of Revelation 14, and it would be their responsibility to decide one way or the other whether they would continue in observing Sunday, which is a false Sabbath, or keep the true Sabbath of God Almighty, because we believe that the Seventh-day Sabbath is the...
All right, now it's important that it's the Seventh-day Adventist position that Saturday is the day to keep the Sabbath.
The Seventh-day Sabbath of the Lord. Let me hurry on so that you could have some time to answer my question. The Advent message, the Seventh-day Adventist message came up as a aftermath of the Millerite movement, and in 1844 we consider that to have been the great disappointment, because Miller and the rest of the people who were preaching that Jesus was coming soon believed that he would come in 1844, and they set a date. And after he didn't come in 1844 and they were disappointed, a small group of people gathered together and continued to study God's word, and it was around that time that they felt urged to preach this message, of the three angels, because they felt that God had given them very special light from his sanctuary, and that in that message a focus was made on the fourth commandment of the Decalogue, and they feel that this corresponds to Daniel, that the message of Daniel in Daniel 8, I think.
I'll tell you what,
now. However, Daniel says that he was concerned about the vision he had, and he asked the Lord for an understanding. And part of the understanding he got was that on the 2,300 days,
okay, I'm sorry that I was trying to break in and I couldn't. This is getting really very long, and as I said, when you first called, this is a question program and not a audio commentary program. And so I'll put you back on the air to ask your question. But I think we've gone on too long like this, okay? Okay, can you ask your question now? Huh? Can you ask your question now?
I can.
Okay, go right ahead.
I think, huh?
Go right ahead. Do you have a question? You're on the air. You want to ask your question?
Okay, I was wondering, after you've gone through something like demon possession or what we're talking about, what are the steps to getting out of it? You've decided